Welcome to Deep Dive Cuttlefish. Okay, let's dive in. Imagine just for a moment. What if the physical world you navigate every single day? The solid stuff, time moving forward, you being separate from everything else. What if that isn't the fundamental truth?
Uh-huh. Like not the real reality?
Exactly. What if cutting-edge science, like cognitive science, even physics, is starting to sound a bit like ancient spiritual ideas, hinting that maybe consciousness is primary?
And what we experience as reality is more like an interface or, a construct.
It's a totally mind-bending idea, right? And
Yeah.
it's really at the heart of the material you've shared with us for this deep dive today.
It truly flips our usual assumptions about existence completely on their head. We normally think, okay, physical world first, then consciousness happens.
But what if it's the other way around? That's the fascinating question. And is our jumping off point for today's deep dive into a really extraordinary book, Conversations with God, Book 1, An Uncommon Dialogue by Neale Donald Walsch.
And just to be clear, this deep dive isn't really theology in the traditional sense. It's more about exploring the profound, sometimes pretty challenging ideas in this hugely popular book.
Yeah, and seeing how they connect with other ways of thinking, ancient and, well, very modern.
So our mission, really, based on the sources, is to unpack these ideas, see where they take us, and maybe understand why this material resonated so deeply with literally millions of people.
Right. The core source itself is presented as this direct two-way chat. Walsh asks questions, God answers. It came out in 95, became this massive phenomenon.
Yeah, like New York Times bestseller list for ages, over 2.5 years, translated everywhere.
And the format, just a straight Q&A, gives it this unique, kind of approachable feel, like you're listening in on something really intimate almost.
And the story behind how it even came to be is almost as remarkable as the content itself. It really sets the stage for the unexpected tone of the whole thing.
This is where it gets really interesting. So Neale Donald Walsch, by his own account, was at absolute rock bottom in the early 90s.
And we mean rock bottom, like homeless, recovering from a broken neck after a car crash, relationships collapsing.
His life just felt like a complete failure, total despair.
And in that state, feeling angry, frustrated, like God wasn't listening, he sits down one night.
And writes this furious letter, basically just yelling at God on paper, venting all that pain.
And then, according to Walsh, something startling happens. He hears this voice, not out loud, but inside his head.
Asking, do you really want an answer, or are you just venting? Which is quite a question.
Yeah, and from that point on, he describes this ongoing internal conversation starting up, which he began transcribing.
Through what he felt was like automatic writing. Now, whether you take that as literal divine dictation or maybe tapping into his higher self, or even a profound psychological event.
That's the process he describes. That's how the manuscripts came about. And it explains that very distinct back and forth conversational style. You really feel like you're there.
And that directness, asking these really blunt human questions about suffering and purpose and God, that's a huge part of why people connected with it, I think.
Definitely. The premise is simple. A regular person asking God the stuff we all wonder about. Why is life so hard sometimes? What's the point? And getting these, well, direct replies.
And the tone is key, isn't it? It's not preachy or formal.
Not at all. It's warm. It's surprisingly easy to understand, sometimes even funny. It feels less like reading scripture and more like getting advice from this incredibly wise, deeply understanding friend.
It really does challenge a lot of traditional religious ideas, often presenting views that are like the complete opposite of what many people were taught.
And that tension, that flipping of assumptions, I think that's exactly what struck a chord with people who are maybe looking for something beyond, the usual structures.
He offered a spiritual perspective that felt very personal, very empowering, rather than relying on, say, external rules or authorities.
Yeah, exactly. Less dogma, more direct experience.
Okay, so let's get into some of the core concepts here. Some of the really big, maybe even challenging ideas that come out of this dialogue, the ones that make you stop and, well, rethink things.
Maybe the most fundamental one is how it redefines God's nature. You have to kind of forget that image of a stern, judging figure in the sky.
Right. The book presents God as basically unconditional love itself, completely non-judgmental, and fundamentally one with everything. The core message being, there is only one of us.
Everything and everyone is part of God. God is life. God is the energy, the consciousness that makes up everything.
And crucially, this God's love isn't earned. It's not conditional on how you behave. It just is unconditional, which is, wow, a radical shift if you grew up thinking God keeps score.
Totally. And the implication that flows from that is pretty challenging too. If God is pure love and never judges, then concepts like sin as some kind of cosmic crime needing divine punishment are basically human ideas.
Human projections of our own fear onto the divine, that's what the book suggests. God doesn't condemn, period.
Yeah. That's a massive shift in perspective. If God doesn't condemn, what happens to ideas like sin or hell?
It resonates maybe with philosophical ideas like pantheism, God is everything, or non-dualism you find in, say, Advaita Vedanta in Hinduism, the idea that all is one and that one is divine.
It points towards this felt sense of interconnectedness, not just an intellectual idea.
Let's hear a little bit of how the book puts it.
Okay, yeah. Here's a key bit. Reading, God is not a punishing God. God does not judge and is not to be feared.
Wow. Just hearing that, it can be incredibly freeing for some people, or maybe really confronting depending on your background, right?
Absolutely. It changes the whole basis of your relationship with the divine, away from fear and obedience towards something else entirely.
It forces a total reevaluation. Now, building on that idea of God as love, the book offers this remarkably, almost deceptively simple way to look at all human behavior.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Basically says that everything we do, think, or feel at the very deepest level comes from only one of two places, fear or love.
Just two fundamental emotions. So things like anger, jealousy, greed, needing control, those are all just different flavors of fear.
Whereas compassion, joy, generosity, creativity, those are expressions of love. Every single action traces back to one of those two, fear or love.
The power in that is how practical it is. If you can honestly ask yourself, okay, where is this coming from right now? Fear or love?
It gives you immediate clarity, a guide for your choices, for personal growth. It's such a simple question, but man, it can be incredibly revealing about your own motivations.
It really makes you pause and look inside, doesn't it? Let's hear the book's take on this.
Sure. It says, reading, all human actions are motivated at their deepest level by one of two emotions, fear or love.
You can apply that to anything, really. Why are you worried about that deadline? Fear of failure. Or love for doing good work. Why did you snap at someone? Fear. Or, well, it's usually fear, isn't it?
It often is. But yeah, thinking about everyday stuff through that simple lens, fear or love, can be surprisingly insightful. It cuts through a lot of complexity.
It really does simplify things. Okay, now for maybe the most controversial idea. The one that really makes people lean in or sometimes push back hard.
Yes. The statement about morality. That from God's absolute perspective, there's no such thing as right and wrong.
Okay, hold on. Let's unpack that carefully, because that sounds potentially dangerous, right? If there's no right or wrong, does that mean anything goes?
That's the immediate reaction, and it's understandable. But the book is very careful here. It clarifies that this no right or wrong is from the absolute perspective, the realm of pure oneness where duality doesn't exist.
So in our human experience, where we do have duality, we obviously make distinctions. Things do have consequences.
Exactly. It's not saying anything goes or that harmful actions are fine.
Yeah.
It's shifting the basis of ethics away from external rules based on fear of judgment.
Towards what? Self-awareness. Intent.
Towards intent, authenticity, and the outcome you're trying to create. The suggested question isn't, is this right or wrong according to the rules? It's more like, does this action reflect who I truly want to be? Does it come from love?
And the book strongly emphasizes acting from love, which naturally leads towards choices we'd see as compassionate, constructive, ethical.
And it gives that core principle.
Yeah.
What you do to another, you do to yourself.
Yeah.
That's a powerful ethical anchor right there. It connects your actions directly back to you and the whole.
So it's about conscious creation, guided by love and awareness of consequences, rather than just following external decrees.
Precisely. It's asking you to be the source of your own ethics, grounded in love and interconnectedness. It touches on philosophical ideas, maybe moral relativism or Nietzsche's critique of human-made moral labels, but CWG grounds it firmly in this idea of divine love and oneness.
Okay, that nuance is critical. It's definitely an idea that makes you dig deeper into your own moral compass. Now, moving to another huge concept, one that reframes our whole journey here. Life isn't about discovery, it's about creation.
This is absolutely central. The idea is we're not here to find ourselves like we're some finished product hidden somewhere. We're here to create ourselves.
And the cosmology behind it is fascinating. The soul, which is part of God, remember, is here to experience itself. Before creation, God was all that is, perfect unity.
But in that state of just pure unity, God couldn't experience its own perfection. There was no contrast, no other to know itself against, no that which you are not, as the book puts it.
So creation happened to produce relativity, duality,
Yeah.
light and dark, up and down, hot and cold, joy and sorrow. All so the divine could experience itself subjectively.
Through infinite points of view. Through us, every particle, every being.
We as individual souls are like God playing hide and seek with itself, temporarily forgetting our total unity so we can have these unique experiences.
Kind of, yeah. The purpose isn't finding some fixed identity that's already there. It's actively deciding and creating who you are, moment by moment, through your choices.
Which leads to probably the most famous quote from the book.
Ah, yes. Reading, life is not a process of discovery, but a process of creation. Seeking not to find out who you are, but to determine who you want to be.
That just lands with such power, doesn't it? It changes everything. Life isn't a test to pass or a mystery to solve.
It's a blank canvas. You're the artist. It really echoes those Eastern ideas like Lila the universe as divine play, God's joyful, creative expression.
It puts the power squarely in your hands, not to uncover destiny, but to consciously choose and create your experience.
Wow. These are definitely big ideas, and they naturally spark questions. Based on the material you shared, we saw some common ones people ask about this book.
Right, and probably the first one is, okay, seriously, did Neale Donald Walsch really talk to God? Is this literal?
Understandable question. And Walsh himself maintains, yes, the dialogue happened just as he describes. But crucially, the book itself says you don't have to believe that specific origin story.
The ideas can stand on their own, right? As a philosophical exploration, maybe a profound thought experiment.
Exactly. The conversational format makes it really accessible, even if the God part is a barrier for you. You could see the God voice as, say, Walsh's deepest wisdom or the collective unconscious.
Or just a literary device to explore these complex themes in a really engaging way. The focus here is on the content, the ideas themselves, not necessarily proving the source.
Another big question people have is, how does this fit with traditional religion? Or does it fit at all?
And the book's pretty upfront about that. It doesn't align itself with any organized religion. And it definitely challenges some core doctrines, like saying there's no hell or that God talks to everyone, not just certain prophets or messengers.
Yeah, the God in the book actually says, ours is not a better way, ours is merely another way. It does point out parallels, though.
Right, like the concept of oneness echoes in Hinduism or Sikhism. The idea of illusion or Maya exists in Eastern thought, too. It's presented as another perspective to consider.
One that might complement your existing beliefs, or maybe you challenge them, or just offer something new if you're spiritually searching outside traditional paths. It's about broadening understanding, not replacing one dogma with another.
Okay, and back to that tricky no right or wrong point. People definitely worry. Isn't that dangerous? Won't it lead to chaos if people think they can just do anything?
It's a valid concern, and worth restating the nuance.
Yeah.
That no right-wrong is from the absolute divine perspective beyond our human duality. In our world, actions have consequences.
We make practical distinctions all the time about what works, what doesn't, what helps, what harms.
Right. The ethical framework shifts from external rules and fear of punishment to internal guidance. Authenticity is this love or fear, conscious intent, and understanding that what you do to another, you do to yourself.
And the book consistently encourages acting from love, which naturally tends towards compassion, connection, and ethical behavior as we understand it. It's a call for personal responsibility, guided by inner wisdom and connection.
It puts the onus on consciousness and intention, yeah.
Right.
Not just following rules blindly.
And finally, a question many readers probably have. Okay, if God talks to everyone, how can I hear? Is Neale Donald Walsch special somehow?
And the beautiful answer in the book is a clear, no, he's not special in that way. God talks to everyone all the time. Walsh just listened and wrote it down.
So the communication isn't necessarily like a booming voice from the clouds.
No, it's described as coming through feelings, intuition, sudden insights, ideas, images, even through experiences of synchronicities. The message is, trust your own inner knowing.
Trust your deepest feelings, your highest thoughts. That guidance system is available to all of us constantly. It's not reserved for special people.
It's incredibly empowering, suggesting that divine connection is internal, personal, and always accessible, not something you need an intermediary for.
What's really fascinating then is seeing how some of these concepts born from this very personal spiritual experience seem to be finding these surprising echoes in like cutting-edge science and philosophy.
This is where the deep dive gets even wider, yeah?
Yeah.
The book's core idea is that physical reality might be a construct, that consciousness shapes experience,
Yeah.
that we're co-creators. These aren't just isolated spiritual claims anymore.
You look at someone like Donald Hoffman, the cognitive scientist. He argues, based on evolutionary game theory, that our perceptions don't show us objective reality at all.
Right, he calls it an interface,
Yeah.
like the icons on your computer desktop, useful for navigating, but they don't represent the actual complex reality of the computer's circuits and code. He famously says, "The world presented to us by our perceptions is nothing like reality."
And he goes further, proposing that consciousness is fundamental, not space-time, not matter. Consciousness is the base layer, and the physical world emerges from it.
Then you have someone like Federico Faggin, the physicist who invented the microprocessor. I mean, a hard science guy.
Totally. And his later work is all about consciousness. He now proposes an idealist model where consciousness is the ground of being. The physical world is more like symbols.
Yeah, he says the physical world consists merely of evocative symbols of a deeper reality. It's stunning.
The convergence is striking, isn't it? You have this spiritual dialogue and these advanced scientific inquiries both pointing in a similar direction, questioning the fundamental nature of physical reality, suggesting consciousness is primary.
It really resonates with ideas like a participatory universe, where we're not just passive observers watching a pre-existing show. Our awareness plays a role.
And as we touched on, these aren't brand new ideas in human history. The book's core themes, oneness, illusion, divine play, you find echoes in Advaita Vedanta, Buddhism, Sufism.
It suggests these are deep, perennial insights that humanity keeps grappling with and rediscovering in different ways across cultures and times.
And even that simple fear versus love duality, you see reasons of that in psychology, understanding human motivation. It seems to tap into something fundamental about the human condition.
Absolutely. And looking at the actual impact, it's
Yep.
clear these ideas, however abstract they might seem, have genuinely helped people on a practical level.
Yeah, the sources mention people finding strength through addiction, families sharing the book and finding common ground, study groups popping up, movements like Humanity's Team being inspired.
It shows that these shifts in perspective, seeing God differently, seeing life as creation, understanding fear versus love, weren't just intellectual exercises for many readers. They were tools.
Tools that help them navigate really tough times, see themselves and the world in a new light. It shows the real-world power of changing your fundamental understanding.
It really highlights how digging into these deep questions can have tangible positive effects.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive today. We started with, a man at his lowest point writing an angry letter.
And ended up exploring these huge, challenging ideas about the nature of God as unconditional love, about fear and love as core motivators, about right and wrong being relative.
And this radical reframing of life's whole purpose as creation, not discovery, and seeing these surprising connections to ancient wisdom and even cutting-edge science.
It's quite a journey. It suggests the universe might just be far more conscious, interconnected, and, well, responsive than we usually think.
And that leaves us, and you listening, with a really powerful thought to mull over. If who you are is less about finding some fixed thing,
And more about actively creating who you choose to be in every single moment.
then who do you want to create yourself to be?
What does that idea mean for the next choice you make today? How you approach a problem, how you interact with people.
It's a deep question. The book itself encourages that kind of personal dialogue, that inner exploration, and we encourage you to continue it on your own.
Yeah, definitely. Let us know what resonated with you from this conversation. What ideas sparked something? Share your reactions, your questions.
And please suggest other topics or sources you'd like us to tackle in future deep dives. We love hearing from you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this uncommon exploration.
Thanks for being part of the deep dive.